Have you ever tried to crack one of these things? This is a puzzle that most definitely has an answer, but most of us are okay with walking away before we get there. Why? Well, this Rubik's Cube doesn't define who I am. It doesn't challenge my core beliefs about this world. But what happens when we're met with a puzzle that does? Well, a lot of us end up getting stuck in rumination. In this video, I want to talk about that and share 3 common ways that we ruminate after a relationship with a narcissist. And I want to close with 3 tips for interrupting that negative pattern. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina. On this channel, we talk about emotional abuse, spirituality, and self-development. Today, we're talking about rumination. So what is rumination? Essentially, another way to talk about rumination is to talk about overthinking. It's a pattern of obsessive thoughts that are difficult to control. And it's so common that we end up in this place after relationships with a narcissist. So why is that, and why do we ruminate? Well, first, let's talk about the brain and how it works in really simple terms. The brain's job is to figure things out. The brain is responsible for using our senses to figure out the world around us, and the brain is also responsible for figuring out and controlling what's going on within us. Again, the brain's job is to make sense of things. Now, you probably already know this. A relationship with a narcissist does not make sense. Now, we're going to talk about 3 common ways that we ruminate after a relationship with a narcissist, and I'm also going to talk through why these things do not compute and how we can get stuck in these patterns kind of like a broken record. So the first way that we tend to ruminate after a relationship with a narcissist is in thinking, what could I have done differently? Could I have stopped this negative outcome? Could things have gone better if I had only done XYZ? And the truth is, and we know deep down inside, that the answer is no. There's nothing you could have done. Relationships with narcissists are very predictable. They're so predictable, in fact, that they go through 3 very predictable stages. There's the idealization or love bombing phase, and then there's the devaluation phase, and then there is the discard. And the reason why this doesn't make sense, the reason why this does not compute in the brain, is because you've probably done a lot of things to try to make it work. You've probably taken all the steps that you're thinking about and ruminating over in various ways throughout the relationship. And everything you tried, you kind of ended up feeling like you were banging your head against a wall because nothing worked. And that's because nothing would work. The second way we tend to ruminate after a relationship with a narcissist is thinking about what if the good times come back. And this is especially common if you've dealt with a narcissist who likes to hoover. So if they have already come back and it feels like the love bombing or idealization has come back momentarily, you might think that this is going to happen again. Again, the brain likes to make sense of things, and if something has happened before, the chances that it's going to happen again are pretty good. So it's easy to get stuck in this one. And so here's how I like to look at this. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, that first stage, the idealization or love bombing stage, it's more intense than you would find with like a typical honeymoon phase. So you might feel like you made such a connection like you've never made before. But the reality of the situation, and you probably know this because of the later phases, the devaluation and the discard phase, is that you didn't actually make a connection at all. It was really, you were dealing with somebody who was playing a role. And, you bought that role and you felt it and it felt real. And it's hard to reconcile that. It's hard to reconcile the fact that you didn't have the connection that you thought you did. Because in the moment, it was very real for you. But in a relationship with a narcissist also, like I said, there are the phases. And there may be some overlap, but it very much goes in that exact order. So with the love bombing phase, you can choose to only look at that phase in that moment, right? And that's kind of what a lot of people end up doing after a relationship with a narcissist, because you just end up romanticizing the entire relationship based on that initial phase. You might think that you've met your soulmate. You might feel like you've had a connection like you've never had with anyone before. And this is where things get tricky. And I've said this before, but it's extremely difficult to understand what it's like to lack empathy when you have a good amount of empathy. And yes, narcissists do have a lot of cognitive empathy, which means that they understand your feelings and your emotions. They understand if I do this, they'll do that or feel this way, but they do lack the type of empathy that creates that human connection. So here, you may be choosing to romanticize or focus on the part that felt good, which is understandable, but you can't truly make sense of it because this relationship was kind of like a 3-part series. There was, yes, the love bombing or idealization phase, and you can look at that as part 1 in the series. But then there was also part 2 and part 3, and part 1 is completely misaligned with parts 2 and 3. So when you're in the beginning and everything is good, you think that this person is in love and you have this true connection. And then when you get to the later phases, you end up seeing a side of this person that you didn't know existed. A side that you can't imagine anyone would show to someone they love. And so here's the poor brain trying to make sense of all this. But the thing is, it doesn't make sense. It's not something that we can really easily comprehend. And because it feels so important and so core to who we are and how we form relationships, it's easy to get stuck there, to get stuck trying to figure it out and trying and trying and trying, kind of like a broken record. So the third way that we can get stuck ruminating after a relationship with a narcissist is probably the one that I did the most after a relationship with a narcissist. And this is thinking, what if no one else sees this dysfunction? What if this person goes on and has a happy life? What if it was me all along? So what's really going on here? In this type of rumination, the brain is trying to make sense of something that it has stored conflicting information on. And this is really common with gaslighting. And I'll give you an example. So imagine that you're with a narcissist who is cheating on you. And you know they're cheating on you. Like there's enough evidence. You have enough information to know that hands down, they are absolutely lying and they're doing things they shouldn't be doing. But this person convinces you that you are jealous or that you are overreacting, that somehow everything they're doing is normal and you're the problem. So the example was on cheating. It could really be anything. Any type of gaslighting that's going on, really. If you have ever accepted blame that was not yours, for whatever reason, you accepted it in the moment. It must be me. So in that moment, that was what was real for you, even though it wasn't the truth. So now after the fact, you're left trying to make sense of something where you have accepted conflicting information. So it's almost impossible to reconcile. It's almost impossible to make sense of all of this. But fortunately, there is a way out. You don't actually need to make sense of the relationship. You don't need to make sense out of a narcissist's nonsense. But you can start to interrupt those patterns of rumination and start to get your life back. And I want to share with you 3 tips to help you along that path. So the first thing I want to share with you, I have shared before, and I really felt like it needed to be front and center on this list. And the tip that I have for you is, first and foremost, take care of your body. Now, I know this might sound like it's off topic, but it's really not. The body and the mind, the body and the brain, they work synergistically. So when you're struggling with something, if you're ruminating constantly, you're probably in some level of emotional distress, right? You're probably feeling that on some level. And when we're in that place, we don't tend to prioritize taking care of ourselves. If you're not feeling it, just try taking baby steps, force yourself into it, maybe just 5 minutes a day. And that gets me to my second tip, which is mindfulness. So Again, when you're ruminating, mindfulness, being mindful or meditating, oh my goodness, it is the last thing you want to do, but it's also really important. So my next tip is to practice forced mindfulness, which sounds like the biggest oxymoron in the world. Bear with me though. So when we're talking about meditation, one mistake that people tend to make is that they think that they're supposed to force thoughts out of their mind. Meditation and mindfulness are more about acknowledging and accepting what's going on in the moment. So don't try to force the thoughts out of your head, but try to set a timer for 5 minutes every day and try to be mindful. Meditation sometimes does come with that kind of pressure that you feel like you should be doing something and it should be profound, right? This doesn't have to be profound. Just be in the moment. So sit in front of a tree and focus on the details of a leaf for 5 minutes. It's going to feel like a long time. Just do it. And if you get bored focusing on the details of the leaf and your mind starts to wander, focus on something else. Focus on the patterns in the bark of the tree. Focus on something in the moment, and focusing on nature is a really good start. And I'm not going to lie, you are not going to want to do this. You're not going to want to do this, but just do it anyway. Over time, it'll get easier and it'll feel better. The third tip I have for you is to remove any space that you are holding for the narcissist in your life. And this could be, in some cases, it is physical. It's a physical thing. Like, let's say they moved out and they left empty drawers or a space in the closet and you just haven't touched it. Or maybe you're holding on to some of their stuff to eventually give them back when you see them again. What that does is it leaves space for them. It leaves space and expectation. You have that expectation that they're going to return. It might not be as easy to change your mind, but you can change what's going on in the physical world around you. You can remove that space that you're holding for this person, and that can start to turn things around. Now, if you're not holding physical space in the place you live for this person, there may be other ways that you can remove the space that you're holding. For example, if you are avoiding doing something that the narcissist does not want you to do, you might be holding space for them. So let's just say, for example, you like cosplay. And before you met this person, you were so into it, right? And you used to go to Comic-Cons and you had friends that were into cosplay and it was just fun for you. But the narcissist made you feel like it was silly or stupid. And eventually you ended up putting that part of you away. And if you had a parent who was a narcissist and they never let you follow your passion, maybe you wanted to play guitar and they would never let you, or they told you that you weren't good enough, or they told you that it was a waste of time, go ahead and do that thing, especially if the narcissist would come back and not be happy to see you doing it. Because if part of you wants them to come back, you might be avoiding the things that you know they don't want you doing. It's kind of almost like you're trying to be the good little boy or girl. You're trying to be what you think is the perfect partner for the narcissist. But the truth is, there is no perfect partner for a narcissist. No one is good enough for them, and there's a lot of freedom in letting go of the attempt. So we talked about how rumination sets in when things just absolutely do not make sense. And we kind of get stuck in those cycles of trying to make it make sense. So I have a bonus tip for you, and that tip is to focus on anything else. So if all you have in your life right now is rumination, focus on that. Focus on why things didn't make sense, why you are having trouble reconciling what happened in this relationship. And one big reason why it's so difficult to reconcile a relationship with a narcissist is because it feels like love, but it's really abuse. And if you want to hear more about that, I have a video that I suggest you watch. I will link to it over here. I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you next week.